Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to tonight's weekly training webinar for all of the members of Tax Sale Support. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Tonight we're going to be going over buying land and how to buy land online and really kind of why we love land and encourage our students to get started with land if they're getting started with tax deeds.
Yeah, we'll make you a believer, because we feel like it's, especially if you're just getting started.
Yeah, exactly. Once you've got experience, then, go out there and tackle structured properties, homes, commercial properties, things like that. But to begin with, land really is one of the safest ways you can get started as a tax sale investor.
Yeah. Now, for news and announcements here, the main thing to get out here right now is we have a 3-day event coming up soon in Orlando, Florida, December 13th, 14th, and 15th, that we would, well, really, it's already filling up. I think you mentioned we had 3 people enrolled today.
Yeah. So we had, 3 people that just signed up today. So if you're interested, let us know. It's going to be a great opportunity. The last one we held in Las Vegas was a great success. We really enjoyed meeting everyone. And so we had a lot of students that are located on the East Coast. And this gives us a chance to, put on an event for all of our students out there on the East Coast, but also help them get ready for this new year.
Yeah, which there will be tons of opportunities coming up there. And it'll be a good chance to look at also some of the opportunities that are out there and some of the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing, if you guys have any general tax sale questions, go ahead and ask them in the forum. We have that manned by tax sale coaches. So any questions you have, it's a great place to ask, and we're really trying to kind of build a community there.
Now, the topic for tonight, we want to talk about getting started with with tax deed land online, and we're going to be looking at some of the different reasons, ways that that land work out so well here in the beginning when you're going to get started. Land though, has just always been what we've primarily looked at with tax sales. We've been looking at land from the beginning, and we love investments in the land.
Yeah. Well, it really was kind of a learning process, because in the beginning we started with land, but that was because of need, because we didn't have the cash to do structures, and we really thought that structures were where homes and things like that was where the most money can be made.
Yeah.
And as we started investing and learning more and more, we started noticing all of the benefits that are available when you invest in land.
Well, it's just so much more likely to be included in a sale, and so there's so much more of it, that is there. When you are dealing with the structures, you're usually dealing with a small percentage of whatever is available in the auction.
Yeah. Think of it a little bit like a car auction. Let's say you're going to a car auction and there's 100 vehicles, and maybe there's 2 or 3 vehicles that are a Ferrari or something like that.
Yeah, it's like everybody kind of, it's like focusing on those 3.
But there may be a motorhome that's just as valuable as the Ferrari that nobody's looking at, that you could pick up for way less and turn around and make a good profit on it.
Yeah, and so essentially,
like
right, it kind of depends. Some people say, well, I only want to make money on Ferraris, but at the same time, if a person just wants to make money, there are things that are just as valuable. They're just not quite as sexy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the way that you're going to look at it as you get started with tax deeds. And we're talking about buying them online, which will be either online auctions or over the counter, but really these strategies are going to be utilized whether you're buying them online or you're attending a good old-fashioned auction.
Yeah, so the question here that we're going to look at there is, why do we recommend, starting with, starting to buy tax deeds and having that also be land and online for the very first investment? Why is that something that we recommend or push?
Yeah, exactly. Why would we recommend buying land as our first investment and doing it online as well? Well, doing it online, just makes sense because that's going to be the easiest way for most of us. Not all of us live within a tax deed state, and so we may have to look outside of our own state to get started. Unless we're willing to travel, we're most likely going to be looking at some type of online opportunity.
And the future of tax sale investing is online anyway. There will only be more and more opportunities added online, and so I think it's only wise to be looking at the online stuff because it's the direction things are headed anyway. But there are a lot of other reasons though that we would push somebody towards land, and also particularly towards tax sale land. And that is because of the price. And also that you're going to find a lot more of the land itself available, and generally less competition, for each property you're trying to pick up.
Yeah, absolutely. You could invest in land regardless of your location. So, we're located in Utah. We just bought some land this week in Michigan, totally,
Sight unseen.
Yeah, thousands of miles away, 1,000 miles away. We never actually visited the property. And so with land, you can buy them for a lot cheaper than you can with homes and structures because, like we mentioned, everyone's looking at those homes and structures. So there's really good opportunity for the investor that's willing to evaluate the good usable land.
Yeah, there is a lot more of it that is there. But yeah, we don't have to have somebody there to inspect the property, and that makes our due diligence quite a bit easier.
Yeah, it's definitely the cheapest way to buy property, period, is through a land tax sale.
Yeah. Now, some of the reasons why, as you're getting started, why we might tell you to avoid, structured property or properties with improvements, because in the beginning we probably would tell you that, it's not going to be the best thing to do for your first investment.
Yeah, improved property account for less than 25%, and that's actually a really generous number. Some auctions may have that many homes in there. We've seen some auctions where maybe it has 5 or 10% are structure type properties and 90% is land. So there's going to be a lot more of it available, and so if there's only going to be so many structures, there's going to be obviously more competition on it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day too, nobody wants to lose money, but whether or not somebody's going to lose their property comes down to a lot of different factors. A lot of it will come down to who's affected by its loss, and who owns it.
Yeah.
Land is far more likely to be owned outright. It's far more likely to be owned by a single individual rather than having a whole bunch of different people involved or mortgages, things like that. And just some of those things alone make it far more likely to end up in a tax sale.
Yeah. Also, as the auction comes up, there's going to be some properties that end up redeeming, meaning the property owner they're able to hurry and get that money together to pay off the delinquent tax so that it doesn't go to the tax deed foreclosure. Well, if it's a structured property and somebody's actually living in the home, there's a lot higher chance that they're going to pay that off before the auction, so that you're not even going to get a chance to bid on it because it gets paid off, with 24 to 48 hours before the sale. Yeah,
much higher chance of redemption there with homes because somebody would be displaced. It's going to, the effects are real there for somebody. It's also consequently more valuable. And therefore they are losing more money, but also there's going to be more people that are involved on stuff like the paperwork with the ownership of the property, more people to get involved to step in and make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, and if we are buying some type of structured property, like a home, we need to have a visual inspection, an on-site inspection. Now that can be done by somebody else. We could send a handyman out there to take photographs and send them to us, or a photographer, or we may travel there ourselves, but we need to have some type of current photo of the property so that we can judge the condition. And so with land, that's not something that we're going to have to worry about. We can usually get all the information we need off of the online resources. We can't trust online resources when it comes to structured property like homes.
Yeah, one of the risks that that are out there, a very real risk, that you could make as an investor is not evaluating repairs properly, or not accounting for things that might be needed with a structured property, and therefore kind of committing yourself to a larger financial investment, or owning a property with problems.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't make money with structured properties, and that eventually you may get into structured properties. But if you're a new investor, and especially a new tax sale investor, getting started with land is going to help you avoid making some costly mistakes.
Yeah. Basically, is just a simpler way to to buy. But there are also a lot of benefits, that land offers. We mentioned that there's going to be a lot more of it, that is available, but it also gets constantly overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely.
People, when they think, when real estate investors, oftentimes, when they are thinking they want to invest in real estate, they tend to think of sexy stuff too.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny how our views have even changed over the last 15 or 20 years. If we're looking at a tax sale list, and let's say there's some $500,000 home, that's interesting to us. Oh, no, look at this beautiful home. But if there's a $500,000 lot that could be subdivided in a great area,
yeah, that's way more interesting.
That to us is the sex,
and it has a much higher chance of actually going to the auction.
Yeah, you can't get anything more beautiful than that, because we don't need to worry about all of those things like foundations and roofs or any of that. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's just a big piece of land with a ton of potential. It could be anything. Or has the potential to be used for a lot of things. So in that way, it's a lot easier for us to buy it, and also it also translates to selling it. Makes it easier to sell.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to do showings for the property or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to worry about sending somebody out there to view the property, or a realtor or anything like that. As like Shay mentioned, in actually showing or viewing the property. Anyone can drive by and see it.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be the best deals, to come out of tax sales, or with counties and tax sales, is always land.
Yeah.
And the land we can get sometimes for almost for very little or almost nothing. We're also able to eliminate all of the risks associated with with any kind of structure or improvements.
Yeah, age, condition, improvements. Really, the only thing that we need to worry about with land is we need to make sure that it has both use and value.
Yeah, so some of the ways we check that, we make sure that it's accessible by public road, and that it is also usable for its intended zoning purpose.
Yeah.
So if it's zoned residential, we want to make sure it's big enough for a house. If it's zoned something else, we want to make sure it can be used for that purpose. So, commercial, we'd want to make sure that it has some commercial use.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're able to eliminate a bunch of the things that we would have to worry about if we were dealing in some type of structured property.
Yeah.
So as far as our options, we really have two different options when it comes to buying tax deeds. Number one is going to be online auctions, and number two is going to be over-the-counter property. And so, with online auctions, they really are something that me and Shade first, started seeing happen in 2003, 2004, 2005, and there was just a couple to begin with, but there really is just a ton of opportunity with online auctions.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that's happened is just the number of auctions, the number of counties that are offering their properties through auctions has gone up, and so the number of auctions every year goes up, and we think that's going to be a trend that we'll continue to see. There's just going to be more and more of them that are they're being added to the rolls of places that offer online auctions, which is excellent for us, because it just makes it possible for us to buy there that much easier.
Yeah, exactly. And you can go and see all of the online auctions that are taking place within the list center, and see what different auctions are taking place, which different counties are being added to the list there within the list center.
Yeah, what's happened with the online auction providers, so there's still a relatively small number of online auction providers, that are out there. But what's happened is they've, just collected more of the work and grown. And so between, these companies here, we have most of the auctions that take place. There are some counties that kind of have their own stuff set up, but for the most part, these guys cover or handle most of it.
Yeah, there's some different companies out there, maybe about a dozen total of smaller websites or little companies that will do sales. Sometimes there's local companies like in South Carolina or Virginia or different places that'll do, sales within that area. But like Shade said, these are the big boys, Bid for Assets, Real Auction, Grant Street Group. SRI Auctions is actually their online auction division is called Zeus. Auctions, and then Civic Source. And so, probably 80–90% of the auctions that are online are going to be held through one of these major providers.
Yeah. Of course, the other option there though is to buy it over the counter, which over the counter is going to give us the opportunity to buy these properties after the sale directly from the county. So we get the added benefit of not competing with anybody and being able to pay the minimum bid price to acquire it.
Yeah, and that's one of the major benefits with over-the-counter properties is we're not going to be bidding up the price. So, whatever that delinquent tax is, that's usually what we're able to get it for. In fact, there's some opportunities where if properties have been on the book for a long time, you could pick it up for even less than the back taxes. And so when it comes to over the counter, there really is thousands and thousands of properties available in, dozens of different states across the country where you could pick up these over the counter deeds.
Now, the term over the counter is not a general term that is known between counties. In fact, there is an incredibly low amount of work that counties do with each other, or that they have, especially in between states. Counties in different states never talk to each other, never have.
No.
And so terminology and things like that are completely different. That's part of what you need to know going into an area is what the terms are and the terminology that they use, because if you don't know the terminology, you can feel pretty lost.
Yeah, well, it may be hard to find the information. Just knowing what the term is or what it's called within that county is going to make it easier to find the information on, even just doing a search on the website. But, some of the most common names are going to be something like assignment purchasing, county owned, tax forfeited or forfeited land, land bank, repository property, struck off, and then upset bid and list of lands. And there's actually some more. These are just kind of the most common ones.
Yeah, that's just a whole bunch of them. But yeah, all of those essentially mean over the counter. And that really just means
there's county held,
Mm-hmm.
There's I know there's other ones too, but there is just a ton of different terminology they can use. Now, one thing we've done with the state guides is if they do use a particular terminology within that state, we've tried to list it within the state guide to help you narrow down that information.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at buying, potential land, or if we are looking at property, what exactly is it, that we're looking for with a piece of property? And here, let's talk about some of the different characteristics that are important to us, and kind of the role that they play. So, the size and location of the lot is kind of one of those first things that we try to look at and see for lots of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be one of the first things we look at besides price as we get into the county records, or if it's on the list, that's going to help us determine if we even want to research it or not. And part of the reason is because there's a ton of junk properties, small, thin strips of land, different types of properties like that are going to be smaller than 0.1 of an acre. And so usually, we're going to avoid looking at properties that are smaller than that. And there may be exceptions in certain areas of the country where they have lots that may be 0.8, 0.9 mobile home lots, things like that. But usually, if it's smaller than 1/10 an acre, it may not have any type of use.
Yeah, and that's actually something that's probably controlled too by county and by city or county
Definitely,
ordinance.
yeah, absolutely.
And when they are designing an area, or developing, an area, there's always going to end up being, I think they try to develop it to make the most effective use of the land, but they are always going to end up with pieces that are left over in a way. And yeah, those do just constantly cycle through the system over and over again. What we want to avoid is buying one of those. We only want to pick up property that has, that has use and value, and that's part of what we can determine by getting an overhead map. Part of that use is making sure that it's accessible or from a public road. But the shape also, can change how effective or usable it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to see that information. Sometimes the size will be in feet. So it'll say 100 by 250 feet. Sometimes it'll be in square footage, or sometimes it can be a percentage of an acre, like 0.25 or 0.39 of an acre. But all of those are going to be things that we're going to be looking for to let us know what the size of the property is.
Yeah. And so, if it is large enough for the zoned purpose and it's accessible, then from there we can kind of move on, into in other aspects of it, because we've been able to define at that point that it does have, potential use. At that point we want to know what the value of it is.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing we're going to do is check the value. We're going to look at the assessed value, but we're also going to look into the market value as well in this stage.
Yeah. Now, both of them are going to be important to us because, of course, if we own this property, it'll be our choice on how we go to sell it. What we're trying to really determine, though, is how much we should potentially pay for it, and if it's worth paying anything at all. And so one of the things that we can look at in order to determine that is we can use the county's assessment on the property. We can also look at the history of the property and how much it has sold for in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point. As we're going through it, if we've seen that it sold recently or semi-recently within the last 5-10 years, and how much it sold for, or how long ago it did sell for. All of that information is going to show us when was the last time somebody purchased it, how much did they pay for it, what type of deed was there. And so as we look into that property history value, we're actually going to get some of the other information we're looking for as well.
Yeah. So all of those, every aspect that tells us something new. The accessibility, I guess, something I kind of talked about there, in the beginning there, that we're looking at overhead, but I still think it's important to talk about, because it can also be something that can affect the likelihood or whether or not the property is going to have easements. We're always looking at how the property is accessed and how it might be used that way.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to make sure, that the property does have some type of road access. So whether that be it, has an easement that allows it, somebody to drive through another property to get there, which is going to be rare. But most properties, we're just looking for properties that are going to have direct road access.
Yeah. We want there needs to be direct access there, because a landlocked property is almost always going to be a problem to sell.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially because the owner can't access it, legally any way.
The next thing we're going to be looking at is the zoning. And zoning really comes down to the city and county level on how the property is going to be zoned, depending if it is, within the county, or if it's zoned within the city zoning requirements.
Yeah. Beyond zoning, it's really just either, vacant or improved. So the zoning can have a big effect on its value as well, in good ways. And the properties that have special zoning oftentimes are in greater demand because there's less of it.
Yeah, well, zoning is how the government controls how the land is used for. So whether that zoning be, recreational or residential or commercial or industrial, all of these zones are going to have different classifications. And within that, and essentially property with it that are going to build or be used within there have to fit within those guidelines.
Yeah, it's really about their urban planning or land use
so
planning.
as much as you want to, you couldn't build a residential property in a commercial property unless you got that rezoned or somehow got that worked out.
Yeah. Now, next to that value, as we're looking at the property, we're trying to get an idea for, what the property can be used for. If it has a use. So, for instance, if it is a residential vacant lot, is it a lot that could be used for a home? That would make that a usable property, for a home. But if you couldn't put a home on there, we couldn't very well say it was usable.
Well, and that's kind of a little bit where all of those other questions, as far as the size, the zoning, the accessibility, all of those come into play for the property use, where, just like you mentioned, what can the property use for? Really what we need to make sure is that it has some type of use, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, real world use. And
if it's farmland, it can be farmed. If it's residential, you can build on it. The one thing we don't want to buy is a small strip of land.
Yeah. You also want to consider your exit strategy. So before you buy, you want to have a good idea for how you would plan to sell that property. In other words, when you do buy something, it should be because you already kind of have a plan for how you would sell.
Yeah, absolutely. With all of our coaching students, as we're buying property, we've at least got an idea of what we're going to do with it, before we've even made the offer. So we've got an idea. Are we going to be wholesaling this property? Is this a property that we want to take through quiet title, and get, financing for?
Or, are we going to sell this with seller financing?
Yeah.
Because we might take a completely different approach if we're going to do seller financing from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to offer it to the neighbors for a discount? That's something that we do as well. Once we purchased any of these lots, letting the neighbors know, hey, we purchased this property. If you're interested, we'll give it to you for a highly discounted cost. Is a quick way to get rid of the property.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the nice things. And if you are making your purchases, by the way, based off of your exit strategy, you're always going to be safe because, you're doing that based on comps and what is out there for sale and what's happening in the market right then. So you're really educating yourself pretty well for that kind of a price point.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as targeting the right land, so go through and talk a little bit about that. I think that's kind of something we've already covered a little bit. So as far as land to target, one thing that we're going to look for, and this is one of the most common, but it is kind of our bread and butter, is improved residential lots.
Yeah.
And residential lots, period.
Yeah.
Non-improved and improved.
Yeah, which in saying improved vacant lots or unimproved vacant lots is really about whether or not they have any kind of utility needed, right there at the property, to be used, or whether that's something that additional work would have to be done for.
Yeah, exactly. Is there curb? Is there gutter? Is the power and water all there? So if we're looking at a property that's within a newer subdivision and there's a bunch of homes all within that subdivision, there's one empty lot, that lot has power and water. If we're looking at more of a county road, that may be more of a non-improved lot because there isn't the power. There probably is going to be power close to the road in a lot of them, but it's not set up as an improved lot.
Yeah, definitely. And
that could also have to do with an address as well.
Yeah, something else to think about or consider is that oftentimes, though, whether an improved lot could mean a lot that is ready for a trailer. It can mean a lot that that's had a trailer before and has all the hookups, and that actually is a very valuable asset for the property to have. If it's set up for a trailer, it's going to be able to attract buyers.
Yeah. The next type, probably the second most common, is going to be commercial land.
Oh, sorry.
I guess we can actually probably go through them all that way. Anyway. So residential lots, like we talked about, they really are, one of the most common that we're going to see. And to give you guys kind of an idea, here are some different types of residential lots picked up by some of our coaching students.
Yeah, and they, I think all of these look great, but we always love properties in areas where, there are already homes. What we don't want is to buy a lot in the community that was never built.
Yeah.
We like areas, where there are property owners and also, vacant or empty lots that are available, because we always know those have value.
Yeah, well, even looking at these three different property examples, the property on the far left and the property on the far right are what we would classify as improved residential lots.
Mm-hmm.
They have curb gutter, they're within, set subdivisions. The property in the middle is actually, well, it kind of probably is improved as well in some ways, but it's a more rural lot, a trailer lot.
Yeah.
You can see that there's a trailer next door to it. Somebody could build a trailer within that area. So really what they would probably have to do, because there's, power and water, they probably do really have power and water right there at the street, but it hasn't been cleared. There's nothing like that. You've got to go in there and do that before building the trailer.
Yeah.
Or putting the trailer on it.
Yeah, commercial land is something that it's very attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times commercial property is going to be a lot more valuable than residential land. It's also going to be less of it, but it can be sold for a higher profit.
Yeah, there is greater potential profit there on it because there is just less available commercial land. And so whenever we see commercial land, we're always interested in seeing what it is, and in picking it up if possible, because something else with commercial property is that we're selling it to a different group of potential buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a situation where we're selling it as a cash sale and really kind of wholesaling it, and somebody goes through the process to get quiet title and do all of that. Or we could even go through the process of getting a warranty deed, because commercial land is going to have more valuable. So it may make sense to go through, spend the money to get quiet title so you could sell that for top dollar, where somebody could get financing, because depending on the type of commercial land, it could be high, it could be more valuable.
Yeah,
probably is.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think the other thing that commercial land can also work out really well with is seller financing.
Yeah.
Because you have people that are looking, oftentimes, something business related to do there with that, with that lot, and seller financing is always optional.
Commercial can really be follow different types of land. I mean, something even like retail, would be under the kind of that commercial banner.
Yeah, which Michael's example is a great example here on a commercial lot, and the kind of thing that ends up in a tax sale. This property here, was located in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and it was a commercial piece located in the middle of downtown, downtown area. You can see that's actually a Wendy's there off there to the right, but it was it had some improvements, and it was paved basically, or it had asphalt on it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a perfect example, like Shade said, of a property you could pick up and turn around and sell. A business could buy this and automatically put on a car lot or a storage, or lots of different things. You could put a fence around it. There's a lot of opportunity, with just purchasing it as is.
Yeah.
And then somebody, of course, could improve on it and put a restaurant or whatever they wanted to on it.
But yeah, really the value on it was pretty good too. Yeah. Now, also something else we're going to target here are large plots of land. Oh, we love large plots of land.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the first things we're going to look for is those larger pieces, because there's going to be less of it, but also just like commercial land, when we're looking at land, there's going to be a lot of residential and just kind of your residential building lots. And then as we get into commercial, there's going to be a little less, and with large plots of land, there's going to be a little less, but these have such a higher value. You can make a higher potential profit, because these properties could be worth 30, to $200,000.
Oh yeah. In fact, you know, I think that they represent some of the best potential real estate opportunities in the nation. You know, if you can find certain plots of land there with tax sales. And
Well, in some, it's kind of, there's going to be different uses. Some you could have large plot of land that's really just more of recreational. We've seen some of that in certain areas of Michigan, and then there's other parts where there's going to be, it could be used for developing or something like that, which is even going to have a lot more value.
yeah, if you can develop some land, is a great way to take some land and to turn it and make it even more valuable. Yeah. Oh, what's interesting? We had Dan on this last time, and he actually sold that property on the right.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, here's a couple of larger pieces of land, and these aren't massive. In fact, if we were going to show one in Dan's, it probably should have showed the 24 acres, because that's more of even the larger types that we like to look at. But these are larger type properties, 2.4 acres, 3.1 acres, anywhere between, when we talk about larger, really probably anywhere between an acre to 100 acres or 200 acres, as big as there could be possible.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, in some places a half acre feels like a big lot. It kind of depending on what's available. So the bigger the better, though, in almost all cases. In fact, we were just talking with the member that bought the property there on the right, and I think he told us that he ended up selling that for 9,000. I think he said.
Yeah.
And so he did pretty well on that particular lot. Considering that that he paid a couple $1,000 for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it would, a wholesale type deal where you're just selling it, turning around, getting 3 times what you paid for it.
Yeah, really though.
4 times, I guess.
Yeah, any kind of a big chunk of land, could have, has value and could be worth picking up. But we've seen a lot of different types, including things like boat slips.
Yeah, in fact, we saw that just recently. Yeah, boat slips starting at $100. In fact, I would have been interested to bid on one just to see, because in looking at the ones for sale, a lot of them were between 5 to 8 grand for like these 40-foot boat slips. But it's just similar to a piece of real estate where you are,
No, you have to pay it. There's going to be association kind of
that's
fees.
the one thing that's going to be different, is there is going to be a big association fee, and that was part of looking into it, is it's going to be a $400 or $500. So you're going to really want to make sure you're going to be able to sell that. Otherwise, you're going to be paying $400 or $500 in like boat fees, association fees. And it was a really nice setup.
Yeah.
They had all kinds of clubhouses, and the boat slips actually had power and water and all these things you could plug into.
Yeah. They're a good example of another kind of opportunity. But also, it can be opportunities with things like farmland, or lots that look like they could be used for agricultural purposes, for farming. Any kind of mobile home lot, we're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just selling a lot to a neighbor where they may want to use it to store something on.
Yeah.
People could buy property just because they don't have enough parking and they want to park some vehicles or park a motorhome or something like that on the property next door to theirs, but don't own that property. Well, that's a great way, a great way for you to sell that to them, make a good profit, and then now they legally own a place that they can park their motorhome or trailer on.
Yeah, and for the right price, they will jump on that. It's something they may not have considered doing it, but at the right price, it's so worth it to them to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're talking about buying these properties, we're talking about being able to get them for as little as 10 cents on the dollar. Maybe some of the higher, more expensive, nicer properties could, if they're going at auction, could bid up higher than that. But if we're looking at over-the-counter list, if we're looking at some types of auctions, we can usually get these properties around that type of price.
Yeah, which is the only, definitely the cheapest way you're going to be able to acquire real estate, in America. And it is, yeah, definitely the cheapest of tax sales. Those are the cheapest way to pick them up.
Well, and we're talking about tax deeds here, but these same strategies can apply with tax liens.
Yeah.
In fact, if we're looking at tax liens, you would have a higher chance of actually acquiring the property after the sale. But the competition thing still applies with tax liens. People will bid on a $200,000 home and bid that interest rate down to 6%. And on the $200,000 piece of land, maybe it ends up getting bid down to 17.5%.
Yeah, because the home is more sexy, even for the lien, even though the reality is they're both going to end up redeeming because they both have high value.
Yeah.
And, but there's a lot more people trying to buy the lien against the single family house than there are against, that piece of land. Therefore you could earn a, higher rate of return and still have your money just as secure.
Yeah, exactly. We would way rather, earn 17.5% off a piece of land than 6% off a structured property. Because like Shade said, 95% of chances are we're going to get this redeemed. We're never even going to own the property with a tax lien. But when it comes to land, it's a great way to start, regardless if you're starting with tax liens or tax deeds.
Yeah, it's yeah, that's true. That actually is true with both of them. But it is a good way to get started, and it's a way to alleviate a lot of the potential problems, especially if we're talking about deeds and trying to acquire property. It's a great baby step for you to take when you're trying to buy your first tax deeds, and you're still trying to get started. You can buy tax deeds for very low dollar amounts that still have tremendous value.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do the research from your home. Based on our online research, we can research the online GSI maps to see where the property's located, where the lot lines are, what the overhead images look like. We can get street views, we can get county record information, we can get do comparables. And based off of all of that online information, we can make a decision without ever going to the property or without ever sending somebody out there to do it if we're looking at land in most situations.
You know what else is nice about land is that checking the comps on land is easy.
Yeah.
It's way easier checking the comps on land than it is, it's like checking the comps on homes, for instance. Because when you're checking, the comps on homes, everything with the home, homes have to match up and be very similar. Whereas with land, you're basically just trying to find other properties that are similar in size.
Yeah, and what are they selling for, per square foot within that area? Look at the different properties that are currently for sale and seeing how much cheap property there is. How much, look for lots that are similar to that and see what the competition looks like. Shade's exactly right. That whole research process, the whole research process period is going to take a lot less time and a lot less work if we're researching land and buying land and structures, because we're not going to have to worry about the potential rehab cost.
Yeah.
Figuring out does it need a new roof?
Yeah, exactly. The condition of the improvements and also a lot of times we're we can be dealing with larger amounts, but it's not the amount of the investment that requires all the additional work. It's everything to check the improvements.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have a crystal ball that we can look into and see, what the inside of the property looks like. What does the foundation look like? We have no clue. And so we're kind of guessing. And so when we're guessing, we need to make sure that we're really picking it up at a right price and we've really done our research. And so if you're getting started as a new investor, even if you have done real estate, even if you, hey, I am I've done, structured properties, I've done flip and flip, fix and flips. Still, getting started with land is going to be a lot safer because even though you've done fix and flips, tax sale investing is a whole nother beast.
Yeah, especially with structured properties specifically.
Because you can't send somebody over there to view.
Well, and there are just not that many properties in general, that make it to a tax sale, or they end up being foreclosed on, by by the county because of delinquent taxes. And I think a lot of the time, in fact, most of the time, single family homes end up redeeming. And you can spend a lot of time doing research on properties that redeem. In fact, you might find, people that are constantly looking at the nicest, structured properties probably find their stuff constantly redeeming, because there are so many different reasons, for people to redeem that property. So low chances of it going to foreclosure.
And if it doesn't redeem, it could get bidden up at the auction. All you've got to have is two people that both have more money than sense to ruin a property or to ruin an auction.
Yeah.
Because if they're both buying, and they're almost buying based off the other person's knowledge, thinking, well, if that other person knows, and this isn't always the case, but this is the case in most of the time that we've seen property bid for
human psychology.
Outrageous numbers, is that, one person thinks that other person knows more information, and so they're bidding based on that other person's knowledge, and they're doing the exact same thing. So you have two fools that are bidding against each other based on their own foolish knowledge.
Just kind of bid blindly.
Yeah.
It can happen. It happens with auctions all the time.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
At the same time, though, auctions also, you'll have auctions that end up that way, and we'll see auctions too where they aren't, the properties that are there aren't getting a lot of bids.
Yeah, well, sometimes when you have somebody like that, you let them go at it at the beginning of the auction, on some of those properties, and let them wear themselves out. And then a lot of times we've seen good deals later on in the auction, after they've bidded and spent all their money trying to get the first 5 properties.
Yeah, that is a good tip too, is just waiting for some of the money, to run out.
Yeah. In fact, I remember our very first tax deed auction here locally in Utah. At the beginning of the auction, they had a ton of properties, and they had even, small strips of land and things like that was bidding up at high values. In fact, one of our strategies at the time was seeing if you could make money off a side lot by offering it to the neighbor. And some of these side lots were bidding up in prices, and even any of the regular property was going, pretty high. Well, as the auction went on, near the end of the auction, a bunch of people had spent all of their money, and there was properties you could pick up for minimum bids.
Yeah, in fact, that was when we saw that $60,000 huge piece of land.
160 acres.
Yeah. It was after everybody blew the money. Yeah. We just
if we had that money, if we could have, we were brand new. We're talking about 20 years ago, and we had maybe $1,000 in our pocket, and we didn't have nearly close to 60. But that would, that $60,000 property, 160 acres.
Somebody got a crazy deal on it. Somebody just was able to basically get it for a minimum bid, close to that, and so they walked away, and I think they, that was definitely the best deal that we saw anybody get.
Yeah, that was the first time really too, as well, as it opened my eyes to land, thinking, whoa, there's that type of potential in land. There's that type of size of parcels that come up to auction. Now, it's not going to happen every auction, to have those type of properties, those size of properties, but you are going to have all kinds of good residential lots, commercial land, larger plots of land, all of these different types of land that we've talked about. You're going to see the tax sale full of them.
Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers it here for us. We would encourage that, though, for everybody as you're getting started, to get started with land, and to use that as the way to learn, and take those baby steps, and then you can progress into any kind of property you want.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, if you're interested in coming out to the 3-day, let us know, and we're going to be going over this and actually showing you how to do this while they're at the 3 days. So
yeah, we'd love to meet you in person. The 3-day events are great, really good opportunity for us to get to meet people. But some people learn better when they're in person, and they can really get a lot out of it there, as we can kind of work with them directly.
Yeah, absolutely. We can sit down and talk with you one-on-one and go over your situation and point you in the right directions and help you with your investments. So let us know if you're interested. And again, appreciate you guys for attending this evening.
Yeah, have a great night. See you
Thank
next
you.
week.